You're listening to Content Logistics, a podcast for B2B marketers looking to build a content engine that drives revenue. In each episode, Camille Trent interviews the marketers behind the best content marketing flywheels and uncovers the tactical aspects of content production, from first draft to first customer.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Content Logistics. I'm your host, Camille Trent, and this episode is brought to you by my good friends, Tristan and Justin over at Lotion. They're an agency that helps busy B2B tech marketers launch podcasts like this one. So if you've been thinking about launching a podcast, you need help leveling up your existing podcast, they'll do all of the production and the distribution. They'll help you be successful and ultimately drive revenue. Today, our guest is Corrina Owens. She's the Senior ABM Manager over at Gong. We are going to chat about the logistics of working together with your demand gen or ABM counterpart as a content marketer, content leader, to create content that converts better for ABM campaigns. Corrina, thanks for coming on the show.
Camille, I'm so thrilled to be here. We have chatted back and forth. There was a little puppy that walked across. That's my new girl, Callie, Calypso, Callie for short. But yeah, Camille, thrilled to be here. It's been a while.
Well, I'm glad to have both of you guys on. I hope that she also makes an appearance and chips in here and there. Yeah, I hope so. I have a dog too, and she likes to chirp in as well. So we'll see what happens here. All right. Well, so basically I wanted to bring you on because I've been following you a while, pretty much the whole time you've been at Gong. And so you're a senior ABM manager there. You've been leading the charge, really standing it up from the ground up. And so before I gloss over this, I wanted to make sure everyone's on the same page of what is ABM? I noticed that I throw around marketing acronyms at home and brands I have no idea what you just said. So what is ABM? I've been seeing ABX. What is ABX? And then how did you just get introduced to this whole world?
It is a fantastic place to start. And it's so funny, Camille, because I'll talk to CMOs, CEOs, VPs of marketing, and nobody really, people still really don't quite know what it is or how to define it. So here's what I say to them. Almost every acronym you can think of was created by a tech vendor to sell you a product. And that is what ABM truly, the acronym, that's what it is. And now it's ABX because we're trying to differentiate ourselves with other marketing vendors, blah, blah, blah. What it is, it's account-based marketing. That's what the acronym stands for. ABX is account-based experience, which means it's meant to encompass, expansion once you're a client, et cetera. But certainly that can be done in ABM titles as well or functions as well. But at the end of the day, account-based marketing is a smart way to go to market. It is a go-to-market strategy. It is the alignment that you have internally with sales, with product marketing, with your C-level suite. It's aligning on the best fit accounts and making sure that those accounts are able to buy your software with ease in a way that makes sense and works best for them.
I like it. Yeah, that's probably the best, most succinct definition that I've heard. So how did you get into it? Was it, around the time that said tech marketer was bringing ABM to market? Was it another time? How did that work and what attracted you to it?
Yeah, it was when kind of Terminus was booming, and I really do consider Sangram kind of the godfather of ABM, even though it's been talked about even, decades and decades before that. And it was at a company where I purposely didn't call it ABM, right? Because sometimes just calling things and acronyms in itself, people have connotations with it and it kind of closes the door on conversation. So I just started to bring in strategic elements of how we were going to market 2 companies ago with a company. And I knew if I called it ABM, that would mean that I have a new budget line item or a new approval process. So I just introduced really a concept and campaign frameworks for specific accounts based on what they were showing me with the different data signals I was interpreting from them. And I just started approaching it that way. And it was as simple as, a Google Sheet, CRM, and a couple of LinkedIn ads. So I think what I really want to leave here with people is that when you're thinking about ABM, I understand that they want you to think it's this Goliath of a topic that you have to go and spend researches, or years away in the desert researching. You don't. It's pretty easy to grasp. I think vendors, intentionally try to make it a little bit more difficult as a way of differentiating themselves rather than really helping the marketer understand. Because if you just go and buy a tech tool stack that's ABM, If you don't have a strategy behind it, you're not going to get an ROI. They don't have the strategy for you. They have the technology to distribute a message or a program or a campaign or be of input, right, on a signal. But if you don't have the strategy of what to do with that information, then your line item of ABM vendor XYZ is going to be seen as a fail. So the smartest companies know that, and they do like things like professional service hours, consultations. They'll bring in people like me to advise on what success or what good looks like, etc. But yeah, I went on a little rant there.
No.
That's how I got started with ABM. Is that I didn't call it ABM. I just started doing programs that were strategically designed to target who I knew were accounts that were in market and that would be best fit customers for us.
Yeah, nice. Well, first off, rants are totally okay. I feel like you're not passionate about a topic unless you do go on a rant at some point, like in the conversation. So that's a good like vetting process for me. Like,
awesome.
Can this person vent and rant like about this topic for years? So we got that out of the way. The other thing that I think about with what you just said is like the market and like the message. Like when I'm thinking about like what's gonna make or break like an ABM campaign, it's like the segment that you're choosing, like who's like the targeting really, right? So we're like targeting the right people, reaching the right people. And then, yeah, we're putting like the right message in front of those people, which really is just like marketing, right? Or even like sales. Like it's, when you really simplify it, like it's that. But I think like what separates ABM a little bit is how strategic and how specific it is.
I also think that you definitely described that it's like how you go to market, right? And that's several different departments help a company go to market. But what it also is, and I try to encourage this of like every marketer, not just ABM or ABX specific, but in general, is if you can be the steward of account level data, then you are going to be seen as a strategic partner at any level of the business. So good or bad, like ugly or pretty, like tell the truth. One of the companies I launched an ABM program with, like they had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on research to say, this is the vertical we're going after. We know this is the persona that's going to help us win in the market. And I was brought in early and I said, okay, all right, I will support you. I will build this from the ground up, get this running. And over a period of like a little bit over to a quarter and a half, we realized, wow, no, we are not a fit for the market right now. This product is not ready to go to market for these customers right now. And here's the data to support that. So it can definitely help validate or invalidate your go-to-market strategy. So as long as you are being honest and over communicating about like the reality of how your message is landing with these accounts. And so I just simply say, be the steward of your account data. Then you have a seat at the table and you have a position to defend yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's really like understanding your customer is part of it too, right? Because there's the targeting and there's the market research, there's all of that. But at the end of the day, like if you can describe like who your ICP is, who your ideal customer is better than anyone else in the company, like you have a good amount of leverage and you can have like confidence in that of like, I know, because the other part of this is like, I know where we win and where we don't win. And then to your point, oftentimes where leadership or the company in general thinks they can win is very different and misaligned than like where they actually are winning right now. Like what accounts can we win right now and what do we need to do? What needs to happen with our product, right? To be able to get where we want to go. So the other part of this is just that ABM or whoever is championing this and able to describe that better than anyone else is able to get respect like with the sales org, but also like help with the product roadmap, right? Like describe like, here's what we need. Like, here's the gap, but if we're going to get to this place, right?
Absolutely. And that's why I mentioned at the beginning, like the alignment with product. You don't hear a lot of marketers or ABM marketers talk about the alignment with product, right? We stay solely focused on C-level and sales, right? But the product, like if you're trying to reach that key persona, you need to take in that input that they're giving you and then find a way to address it in the product or fully accept that that is not your market. You may not be ready to go up to enterprise. You may just be fine right where you are in commercial. Like that may be your best fit audience. You may not need to be industry specific. You may be just fine being, horizontal. And a lot of that like can be proven. And then the outcome of that is like, okay, Is your CEO ready to like let go of their dream of what it should be? Or do they still want to push down your throat what it should be, right? And I think buyers are getting so much more intelligent about that, right? Are they meeting me where I want them to meet me, or are they forcing me to meet them where they want me to meet them? And that is where ABM like will not play games with. We meet you where you are, period. Period. End of story.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect transition because I had a question on here of like the when and the who, right? So when do you need ABM? Who needs ABM? So if you can kind of briefly, I know there's a lot of factors here, right? But briefly kind of like describe like what's a good fit company or profile for this type of go-to-market strategy.
I get this question asked a lot, and it kind of surprises me that I get the question asked a lot because I think it goes back to just, again, missing the idea of some foundationals of marketing, right? Like a lot of marketing is testing. So ABM is testing a very personalized, specialized messaging or positioning with a company, right? So in my opinion, and I could be wrong, you can do this at any size company. You can do this, at any stage in your company. Now, maybe finding that kind of marketer might be harder if you're at an early stage company, right? Because the more specialized you get, I'm seeing in the market, the more we're valued because there's just been such a lack of understanding and a lack of focus there. Just like with digital selling, right? Like Camille, like it comes super natural to you and myself, but to so many people, it's still this new like 101 concept. That's kind of still what ABM is. So in my opinion, to answer your question, it's the fundamentals of marketing is involved in ABM. It's about testing. And what we're testing is not just do we have a product market fit? Do we have a product market fit with Camille Trent? Like that's how personalized and specific it is. And then, for our sales cycle in enterprise, like that can be anywhere 6 months to a year. So I reevaluate, like, did we even make the right assumptions, at the start of the year? I try to evaluate that like at the halfway point of the year. Another way I evaluate and prove it is I actually, not only do I get sign off an agreement on executive, sales, alignment across the board on who you need to say, yes, these are the accounts we're going to put budget, time, and energy towards. I then show them that we have a control group. So basically a set of lookalike accounts that we're going to compare the campaigns that we run to against. So what they get to see is, because a lot of times, Camille, people will be like, oh, well, yeah, obviously, Corrina, we would have won that business. That was a perfect fit. Well, sure, we knew it would be a perfect fit company. That's why we chose them. But that perfect fit company, there's another one right over there that looks just like them. They didn't get that same campaign. They didn't get that same event. They didn't get that same piece of content. They didn't get that same type of experience. But they were able to move through the funnel faster. We identified more buyers, and we were able to grow the account at a quicker rate than the lookalike account. So it's, again, second rant on the podcast already, but you can do it at any stage. You can do it at any stage. But I think you have to set clear expectations at any stage company with what does ABM mean to the company and what does success look like to that company. Even when I get interviewed or have done interviews in the past, I ask the CEO to describe ABM to me. I want to know if they know what ABM is or not before I join the company, because that makes all the difference.
Yeah, no, that's a good point of just aligning with leadership of what ABM means for this company, right? And how you guys plan to go about it. And if that aligns with, what I'm good at, what I like to do, all of that, right? And because there's another factor to this too of, are you sales led? Are you marketing led? Are you product led, right? If you don't have a sales team, like how you're going to do ABM is going to change like quite significantly, right? It may just basically be like targeted LinkedIn ads, right? With like handpicked accounts, right? So it'll be like more that marketing push, but there may not be like the one-to-one like sales concierge like approach to it as well. So based on what you said, it's more changing the approach of like how you do ABM and adjusting that. But the elements, like the underlying strategy behind ABM is going to help any company.
You summarized that perfectly. Exactly.
Nice. I'm just going to give myself a little pat on the back and keep going here. Okay, so for any content people that are still listening in, I promise that I'll get to the content, but we just wanted to level set on ABM, make sure we're all on the same page now that we've talked about how important it is to do so.
Before you do that, the other element here is that ABM often gets siloed in marketing organizations. And so I really do want to talk to the content people because they have been some of my biggest hurdles to overcome with alignment in my career. They see content a lot differently and get very confused by ABM's role and how we should help shape content. So they are the experts, sure, right? That is their discipline. I have different KPIs than they do. But I'm the closest to the account because I'm working the deal with the sales rep, right? Like I'm an extension of the deal team. So what I like to show to them is like, hey, let me help you reach your KPI by giving you direct feedback from the CEO, CROs are most important for us here. Let me give you direct feedback on your content. Here you go. Here's how we can help push out the message and craft it and refine it and make it better for you. So ABM content people is super. If you have them in your company, talk to them. They're not talking to anybody more than they're talking to their sales. Inside sales, outside sales, sales leadership, they are speaking to them the most. So they're getting that real-time feedback from the audience that you're trying to convert, reach, improve ROI with your content. So it matters to listen to an ABM marketer, even if it's not saying content, every other word, right? Like there's a time and a place. And that's often what I find is that I have to do a lot of like dispelling within marketing organizations about what ABM really means. And content sometimes can be, come with a little bit of a guard of, hey, I've done this research. I know this audience better than anybody else. And I try and share with them, like, we can actually help elevate your KPIs and elevate your content. We'll get sales to understand it because we know how to talk to sales because we do day in and day out. We'll get them to know where the hell to find it, how to use it, what it means. And then we're going to get their feedback from the buyer too and give that to you so you can then make your next piece of content hyper relevant. Or maybe I have such a good relationship with the account team that I can bring them on your podcast, right? So there's so many. Rant number 3 we're on now, Camille.
I love it. So rock them up.
Yeah, that's another reason why this is a content podcast, but ABM has a place and a role with content. Absolutely.
For sure. No, I'm excited about this. So what I'd love to solve is that relationship because they're like, I respect so much like the ABM folks because you have to align with so many different departments. Like you have to be able to work with so many different departments. There's sales, there's content, like there's like the paid team, right? There's so many that there's leadership buy-in, right? Company buy-in. So you have to do like a lot of that work. And so, yeah, what I'd love to get at is how content people can make that easier. Like, what are the basics like to have in place? And so there's a couple different ways I can go about this, but I think I'm going to tease like the content audience a little bit more because I want to go over your playbook. So basically just go through, like you come into a company, kind of like steps, 1, 2, and 3 from targeting to kind of like those champions, which I know is like a big part of your playbook. And then, what type of content was the format of that content that you need to have for this to be a successful campaign? So if you can walk through that, I think it'll be helpful for folks to be like, oh, okay, I see where I could plug into that, right? Like I see like where my role like plays into this whole thing.
100%. Well, I think one of the things that is the least sexy probably about a content marketer's role is like the storing of content, right? Like where is the repository of all this amazing content and how the hell do I get my people to spread the word, right? You're repeating yourself to death, right? You're constantly like resharing things. I'm doing that with you, but I'm doing that with you in a way where like I'm the intent signal, right? I'm the intent signal that can come in and say, hey, Camille, you know that blog you wrote? I have a buyer that needs this right now. Like they need 101 digital selling ebook right now or white paper or whatever you want to call it right now. Here you go. That helps you, right? It validates you. It validates what you're doing. So a lot of what I do when I step into a company is I actually try to find where the content lives and I try to identify the content gaps. And then I try to partner with the content team to say, hey, here's the reality of the situation, good, bad, and ugly. Sales doesn't know that any of this exists. They don't know where to find it. They don't know how to use it, and they don't know what it means. So one thing that I've done is I've created like a newsletter, and a lot of it is actually elevating other departments in my marketing team and the work that they're doing so that they can get inspired and feel more part of the process with sales. And it's very simple framework. It's what's new, what's working, and what's next. And I always spotlight at least one new piece of content, how it was used successfully, and what's upcoming. And that then repeats behavior. But there's no like set it and done, kind of forget it mentality with content. Like it's a constant reminder internally about training them on like, what is our voice? Like, where is our voice? Where does our content live? What does this mean? Who is this best serve? How do I best deliver it? When do I deliver it? How do I deliver it? So that is definitely just something when I come into any organization, I have to focus on first is actually the content team, because that's how I'm going to be able to really help like get some quick wins off the ground with sales. Because that's usually a huge disconnect that I see at any level organization. But you mentioned champions, and I do want to talk about that. And to me, it's the 80-20 rule. It's focusing on 20% of your work effort, right? That are going to produce 80% of your results. So we are very lucky here at Gong to have just a wealth of raving fans. And so much of it truly is organic and just the intentionality of the entire company to be in service of our customers. And so that has made my job even easier, right? To connect champions with other potential lookalike champions, which is where my ABM accounts come into play. So one of the things I did that's related to content and also related to community is I provided an avenue for them to network in two different ways. One, virtual roundtables. A lot of these more senior level folks don't have the time or aren't as comfortable with networking, especially in the digital age, with one another. So providing them an experience and an opportunity to do that in a way that's easy for them to understand, easy for them to access, easy for them to attend and network has really helped our top of funnel pipeline. And then that's content that they can then repurpose with testimonials, right? Like that's a piece of content. Blurbs, you could do a whole video webinar recording following the event if you wanted, or some 30-second clips of people just saying like, this is my biggest challenge that I'm facing in the market right now. And then hearing it validated by all their peers and hearing like our champions and our customers say, yeah, I hear you. I was there. This is it. This is how I think about it. It really helps content understand how to describe the solution that they're solving. So leverage your champions early, often. The second somebody comes to our site, I consider you a customer. I treat you like a customer so that when you do become a customer, when I come in and ask you to speak at an event or give me a testimonial or join me for a keynote speaking presentation, it doesn't come as a shock to you, right? I've already been nurturing that relationship. So I think the content definitely has a role to play in my ABX playbook, if you will. But then there's also just connecting them without any strings attached. And what I did there is I created a program in partnership with Community where at a certain part of the sales process, very late in the process, it's the old way of doing sales is, hey, I want a client reference. And then the salesperson goes and finds their absolute best client reference, tells them exactly what to say, how to talk to them, how to sell to them, and then connects them. That's not what I wanted. Since we have so many raving fans and we were in a heavy November this last year, we were at a very difficult spot because we were competing with some crazy pricing models. I'll just leave it at that with the competition. And I said, you know what? We have more raving fans than anybody in this space. Not only do they love our product, they love our content. They love our brand. They love our voice. They love the people at our company. So let's let them connect with people that are just like them, no strings attached. So we worked with Community and this program called Meetsy to do a matching program. So if you're at a certain stage of the sales cycle, Camille, you can meet with a peer of yours behind closed doors. I don't know what you talked about. I don't know what was said. You chose to sign up, Camille, and so did the raving fan who's a customer. We give them prompts like, hey, what was the most surprising cool feature of Gong that you didn't know? Or, hey, how did you roll out Gong to the CX team or your sales team? Or how did you face this common objection? I don't know if they use that or not. It's just a starting point. And what we found is that just offering that alone, right? Just offering this section of a community to join. You're not a customer yet, but you can join and talk to whomever you want about us whenever you want. Removing that barrier of entry and just letting them lead the process actually helped us win more deals and gain more credibility to our potential buyers. So maybe it's not content per se, but it's us allowing our customers a platform to produce their own content for us. So, I mean, that's kind of like the dream state, right? Is that your content is so good that your customers are actually speaking like you, and they're actually talking about your content and raving about your content and using your content to be better at their job. Imagine giving them a platform to then share that with a future customer. That's the dream.
Yeah, I think of just empowering, right? Like, how do you empower your champions? Like, how do you, in your salespeople, right? To just speak confidently about what you do, right? About what you do and about, in your case, like the research and like the signals and things like that'll come out of some of like these Gong calls, right? Like, how do you show kind of the value that you can get from it? So, and starting with the content. So kind of a follow-up question I had though is, do you think about ranking fans in a way like based on intent? Because I would think that there's like your content fans, right? And kind of your brand fans. And then like on the other end of the spectrum, you have your customers that are paying for this product. Yeah. That are signing up for this community, right? To be matched with people. And so how do you think about, ranking those different kind of levels of fans in like an ABM campaign?
It's a great question, and it's one that I'm having to give more thought to, especially with, NRR being a really hot topic this year and churn, people wanting to consolidate and do more with less and get rid of solutions. So those fans we don't ignore. And as a result, the community approach I just described to you has actually been open now to not just one particular stage of buyer, but anybody. Camille, right now you can go to visioneers.gong.io and you can join our community and you can see the topics that we're all talking about. They're product specific, but they're also just problem pain point specific. So it doesn't have to always be Gong centric. And I think that's how people need to start approaching in this time, because let's be real here. People really are not buying right now. It's very rare that you're going to be in a sales cycle that you can confidently say is going to close. And it's important that you're still selling in this time frame, but it's a different way of selling. And it's really more about that give versus get mentality and removing that barrier of friction of, nope, you got to go through this demo process. You got to give us your email. I'm sure you guys talk about this in content all the time. Like, remove the friction so that they can just consume the way they're used to consuming every other piece of information in their life. So we've taken that approach with our champions. We're not just we are not just looking at the signer or just the power user, right? Like, we are looking at the whole scope of who could be a part of this company and empowering them in different ways. And one of those ways is just by opening them up to a community of peers that they can connect with. And the intent is not that it is going to turn into revenue. The intent is that we're just doing the right thing for our buyers right now.
Nice. Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that because content and community are so closely related and often sometimes under the same umbrella or the same person, right? So understanding like how they work together and how you can leverage other people's content, right? Whether it's an influencer strategy or community strategy, like how all of that can help you write better content too and understand like what people want more of. So absolutely. I think that's really helpful. Okay. So yeah, we talked on just you diving into the content and understanding the content gaps and just current archive, right? So there's that. And then you talked about champions, right? And like kind of like how to insert them into this. And so just like one other thing is just, targeting in ICP, like just any other things that you want to talk about on how you determine what an A+ account is, or if you tier some of those accounts and you're like, okay, we're going to give these to our commercial AEs, right? We're going to give these to enterprise. We're going to give these to BDRs. So just, how you think about ICP and territories, things like that.
Oh, good Lord. It is a long process and one that I recommend you start in October, or if you're in a fiscal calendar year or fiscal year like I am, calendar year, probably even before that. Start early and start often and bring as many data signals as you can as possible. The champions aspect is a big one for us. So we actually use a tool called User Gems that tracks not just current customers, but customers that were actually champions of a deal that we lost that changed jobs. And then we factor that into also like what makes up the account score to where they become, to your point, like a tier 1 or a tier 2 or a top target ABM account. So that's all part of like how we think about going to market. All the usual stuff too, technographic, firmographic, all the usuals you can think of. But you're talking to me about tiering and ICP. So to your point about like structuring that, I think I would advise anybody that's starting and has full control over their ABM program, I would start with asking for service level agreements before launching your program. Service level agreements or SLAs, basically saying, hey, we as an organization said these are the top 25 or top 100, whatever you want to call it, accounts that we're going after. I'm putting this much money, resource, time, and budget behind it. So I expect you, BDR, if you get a demo request from this account, I expect follow-up in 30 minutes or less. And I expect it to be treated with attention to detail. I expect account plans like to be entered in. I expect sales to even be part of the process because they are that important of an account. So in many ways, it kind of, in a perfect world for me, I get to kind of own a slice of the sales process and say, hey, you agreed that you wanted this account. And I agree that I was going to try and bring this account to us. Maybe it didn't start with our ideal persona, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to treat it with the account and attention it deserves. And I think a lot more people are going to be finding that this day and age is that maybe their executive level sales team wants them to have that director or above title or VP or above title or the CFO or whatever, because they know that that's going to be the end or break all. But use this time to talk to those people that are in the trenches and doing the work and can tell you what's going on with the account, what's the political landscape, what's the reality here, and treat them like they're a customer already, and you will get their respect and you will get detailed information that can change whether or not you, like your own assumptions were correct about if they were a best fit account for you or not.
Nice. No, that's really helpful to go through all of that and to just understand what you're trying to do. So let's move into execution. So basically the logistics of ABM content, how to make your demand team love you or your ABM team love you, all of the above. So first I think about just needs, right? When you're going through and you're like, okay, I need X, Y, and Z from the content team. Let's just talk about like those different content types and formats, like whether it's, like sales emails, landing pages, ads, just kind of go through that checklist.
For me with content, it's more about the voice of the customer. And I find that often content is creating, and this isn't to be derogatory, I think it's a top down, the way people structure their goals and their KPIs. But content is often created in a way that self-serves the company and not the consumer. And so what I look for as an ABM marketer is I actually look for testimonials and simple ones, right? Like, why Gong? Why now? Those are the ones that are actually going to really help my content team. Not a 5-page case study that nobody has time to read, that is full of complex words, maybe even be gated. Like, things have changed. Like, people want it simplified. We are in brain overload. Information is coming at us a million miles a minute. It is too much. And especially if you're in a startup or you're trying to create a new category, that is not the way to go. The way to go is through the voice of the customer. How are they speaking? How do they view your product? So a testimonial goes a long way. A person that writes a blog on your site that uses your product or understands your category, that goes a long way. That's what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for things that are going to help my sellers, because my sellers are not my persona that I'm trying to have buy our product. My sellers are just my freaking sellers, and they're in one mode. And oftentimes they're also in a forced mode of one sales methodology and one way of doing things. But as a marketer, I know what I would want, and I know and understand what my champions want and my customers want, and they want it simplified. They want to understand the basics, right? They want to get why it matters to them. And so I'm looking for very simple stuff that I can then repurpose as I learn more about the person or more about the account to make it a reality for them, to make them understand a world in which they could be a Gong customer and how a Gong customer would solve their problems. But I think is too often the other way around, is that a ton of content is created, right? For the sake of needing a bunch of landing pages, needing a bunch of MQLs, but it's not analyzed. Like, is that really moving the needle? Did sending that case study really help progress the deal from one stage to the next? You know what actually does end up, Camille? I've been in a lot of different industries. Little events where people get together and talk to one another about the issues they're facing, and then connecting them with each other, and then reinforcing that by way of an ad that has that same sentiment and that same message. Sure, right? Like, I'm not discrediting anything like that. Or reinforcing that in a guest blog or a guest community forum post. Like, that's what I want from content, is I want them to be so much more connected to the voice of the customer and not the voice of your executive team, because they are very different and they serve very different purposes. And I wish that these teams had more of the freedom to experiment and prove to their executive teams that this is the path forward to get them to what they really want. But to me, it's an archaic way of doing marketing. And it all started because marketing kept having to prove that it had any worth or value, attribution. We created all this software to prove it. Then it got more and more expensive, more and more complex, and more confusing, more and more disconnected. And we're displacing all of that now pretty much. And we're dwindling it down to just what really moves the freaking needle. And with content, in my 13 plus years of experience, what moves the needle is the voice of the customer. Remove your jargon, remove that stupid tagline, remove the lengthy white papers. Like, just be direct and clear. It'll make it so much easier for you down the line. You're not only going to get the right customers, but you're also not going to have to deal about getting rid of the wrong customers that you projected would have given you XYZ revenue 3 years down the line later. So that's my somewhat uneducated but somewhat educated thought on how to think about it.
No, that was a great clip. I'm going to use that. All right. So the things that I heard there that I want to kind of pull out is, well, starting with the first thing it made me think of was what the customer has to say about you is like way more important than what you have to say about you, right? Like, it has so much more credibility behind it,
Yes.
right? And so you've harped on this throughout this episode, voice of customer, right? And so in content being the one, as you see, to own that, right? To really understand like voice of customer, and some of the executions, like possible executions of this, look like forms of customer marketing, like if I'm like not mistaken here. So we can go into like how you see that fitting in like to content, but like the things that I think of are that you've mentioned were kind of like use cases, right? Like, how is this specific customer using this to solve their problem, right?
Yep.
But there's case studies and there's like ways to make it like very jargony, very corporate, very self-serving. And then there are ways to just be like, especially just like self-written. It's just like, here's the blog, like here's my Twitter thread basically about this, right? Like, that's going to work a lot better. Like, here's my playbook, right? Like, just take my playbook. And then spotlight's like kind of like the same thing. Like, anytime that you're just making the customer the champion, or just stepping aside and being like, you can hear it directly from our customers. Like, we feel good about the value that we already provide.
100%. And I'm so excited. You really did pull out a lot of what I'm trying to share here. So many customer marketers think about entering the stage after they're a customer. Your customer marketing, in my opinion, is not just down funnel. It's all the freaking time. And so I've been in a lot of teams where customer marketing doesn't even talk to their client until they've had 2 years within the product and have this really meaty ROI case study. I'm like, why the hell did they even buy us in the first place? Is that person even still at the company? Like, what are you talking about? Let's get feedback like throughout the entire journey and use it. And to your point, just distributing it, giving them a platform to do it. Another thing that I really love to do, which, I think content could have a hand in, is, can you remember the last time your company submitted you for an award? Submitted you for an award. Not internally, externally.
Yeah, I mean, it was before SaaS, like that I can remember, like trophy style, like awards. But then, there's like SaaS awards where typically you submit yourself or like someone in the community submits you. But yeah, there's not usually like a process for like, hey, these awards are coming up. Like, who in our company makes sense, like for these. So it's been a
Not
bit.
not your company, right? So there you go. So you answered my question with pretty much it's been a freaking minute, right? So if you're going to get recognized and Camille's going to level up, Camille's either going to have to completely take this into her own hands, which by the way, everyone, yes, you have to take it completely into your own hands. But what I like to do is I like to elevate them even before they're a customer. If I listen to a Gong recording and I hear about some really cool tactic they did, I reach out and I say, hey, do you want to come on the Reveal podcast and talk about that strategy? Like, that was really innovative. Like, that would be so helpful. It's so timely. It's so meaning in the moment. I want to spotlight you. Or, hey, here's this industry award. I heard like that you accomplished X, Y, and Z. Would you mind if I Gong and submitted you, customer, as a potential award applicant? How incredible is that? Lifting up the customer even before they're a customer. Like, that's possible. So I think customer marketing and content, they think they're just at this later stage, right? Until they've proven ROI and all that. But I, again, treat the customer like they're a customer right at the beginning. And if you do that, that may mean that that customer becomes a customer at the current company they're at, or maybe the company they're at later. Do you think that you're ever going to forget that memory? I haven't. When that's been done for me, I've never forgotten that. That's a huge deal. People are not that intentional. They're not that intentional with their own employees. So imagine a company doing that for a prospect or a customer. And I think there's a place for customer marketing and content to intersect with that.
Nice. Yeah, I realized I completely answered your question wrong, but I understand what you're saying now. And yeah, I had a big like light bulb moment with this at my last company. Like toward the end, we just started doing more events with customers. We were doing that throughout, but it just doubling down toward the end, and to the point where there was one that I remember watching and I was like blown away because they were like just sharing their playbook, sharing their screen, like showing the product, showing exactly how they used it. And I was like, whoa, this is so powerful, right? Like to see it like in context, right? And I think of this as like contextual content, right? And I think that's a lot of what you're saying is when it comes from the customer, it just gives way more context into how you use the product, how you can be successful with the product. Like seeing is believing, right?
Absolutely. And it also gives that individual, that customer, so much confidence in themselves. You're giving them an opportunity that their own boss might not be giving them within their own company. And that might lead to a future job offer for that person. You know what I mean? There could be a person on that line that's like, oh, I love that. I want to hire them for this open role. Like, that's part of the customer journey. Like, these experiences are all part of the customer journey. And there's a great thing that I said a while ago on a panel, but we asked the audience, we were like, hey, there's one product that at any company, is there one product that you really would want no matter what company you were at? And a lot of people raise their hands. So I want people to like remember that, like the experience that you leave with them, no matter the medium or the channel, matters, because if they're not your customer today, it doesn't mean they're not gonna be your customer tomorrow. So even in these challenging times, like even with all this chaos, like what matters is that you're showing that you're intentional and that you care. And a lot of the way of doing that is by actually representing them in your content, in your brand, making sure that your champions are front and center.
Perfect. Yeah, I almost want to like wrap up right there, but I do want to get into a couple more like nitty gritty things. So just kind of format and like specific elements, I think that package content in a way that works for ABM. I think is probably the best way to frame that. So I'll give some examples of, I think we hit on the attributes, right? Like what are some just attributes that need to exist in your content for it to be effective content, right? For it to be believable and credible and all of those things, right? And so once you have that, it's much easier to package good content than just create net new content, right?
100%.
So starting with like, hey, we need like a customer content bucket. We need like some inventory of like content here. And we need it in a way that's going to work for ABM. So, let's say you're doing ads, right? Because you mentioned paid ads. And I'm assuming like leading to a landing page or a blog. I know talking to, demand marketers, ABM marketers, they're typically like looking for, and you could be different on this, but it's looking for shorter content, right? Just like specific things like about the content formatting. for it to really work for an ABM campaign. So if you can kind of like go through some of those things that you look for and that you consult content teams about for like, hey, this is great, like where it's at. Here's what we need to do to prepare for an ABM campaign.
Yeah, I think, you're hitting on kind of a point that's been somewhat of a challenge, I think, recently, which is how do you move a brand that has done so well with one particular ICP, right? Think about all the content we've put out as a company, but it's really for one ICP, right? The salesperson, the person that's doing the deals. And so much about me coming in and joining this company has been me sharing data and feedback on what does it mean to talk to an enterprise, not just individual, but company. Like the quirky sales stuff that made Gong who it was and made it fun to interact with us, it doesn't have to totally be removed, but you're gonna leave people out of the party if you keep staying on tried and true, what's worked, what's not, right? There's different ways to describe something to a specific audience. So to your point, a CRO email is not a quirky email full of lots of jargon and links. It is a short, snappy email, plain and period, simple to the point. And ideally, it's coming from their peer. So I really love when I have the opportunity to be able to match my peers to peers at these accounts. So my CRO to their CRO, right? Like they're just as much as part of the prospecting, in my opinion, as I and salespeople are, is the rest of the organization too, matching CEO to CEO. So we'll often bring them into our events too. So if we're going to ask 12 CROs to join a roundtable, our CRO should be at that roundtable too. And he should be talking himself too, or she should be talking about their problems too, openly and authentically, so that they understand what we do.
Yeah, well, another example I can throw out because you touched on it really well with the email, right? Like an example of that.
Right.
I think a couple other ones would be like, do you leverage personalized landing pages for ABM campaigns? Other types of content that may need to be reformatted. Like, let's say it's a case study and it's like, I like some of the meat in this, but I don't like the formatting of it, right? How do we turn this into like more of a playbook or more of like a customer use case? Just different like examples that you've come across.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I've tried to teach is that just because it exists doesn't, to your point, as an asset, like a landing page case study, doesn't mean that's the way we deliver it. So a lot of what we've done has been creating like personalized landing pages, but maybe it's like my sales rep, like talking over in a video the success with a leave behind, right? I think that gets lost a lot too, is like there's a way to initially deliver a piece of content, and then there's always going to be leave behinds that they can trail back to, right? So the personalized landing pages, they get basically seen as like this is their one-stop shop for everybody at the account to come and interact with Gong account team members on this deal and one another, right? Like this is like their Slack thread, essentially. So we're going to have content that speaks their language. We're going to have proposals that's just for them. We're going to have videos that I'm talking about, that I'm talking to Camille about how I would use Gong if I were in her position. Like we get very specific to how we're communicating to them, where we're communicating to them, and when we're communicating to them. But the biggest thing is to know, like, what does your audience like? How do they consume and learn? And then make sure that it's available for them to consume and learn that way. So I do the email thing, as silly and simple as it sounds, like it's important. You're going to get deleted if they see that quirky Gong sales event type email versus a direct, hey, short 2 sentences, are you available? Email. Like there's just a huge difference in open rate. And then there's a big difference between me as a marketer even joining sales calls. So I join a ton of sales calls because marketing is also part of the process for a lot of our deals, because I understand the marketing tech landscape inside in, and I can explain how they're going to benefit from it, how they maybe need to roll it out to their sales team, because sometimes they're part of that. I was part of that at one of my jobs. So the medium and how is super important. But overall, we're in a day and age where everybody just needs things quick, easy, and simple, right? There is just too much going on. So we can get stuck in the buyer persona perspective. But if you just step back and just think about how the world works at large, we're always on our freaking phone Things are always really simple and easy for us to access. And if there's any additional friction point, if I have to go beyond 2 clicks to get what I'm looking for, I'm out. So I think it's all about reducing friction, and short form videos, peer-to-peer matching with that is huge. So me as a marketer on Gong, talking about how I use Gong, like, I'm an authentic person, so I will never BS it. Like, it's coming from me. And I think that reads through, right? Like I am truly, but Gong is benefiting from that. That wasn't a directive. That's just something that I use my product. I used it before I was here. I know how to speak to it as a marketer. I know how to speak to it as a salesperson because of my role. And so, yeah, I think that pay attention to doubling down on what works, to your earlier point, because I also think now is not the time to spread yourself or your team thin to try 1,000 new different things. Just if it's working, if that little email is working, use that email. When it needs to be tweaked, revisit it, right? Like, don't kill it to death, but use what's working and cut the rest, because it's a drain on your team. It's a drain on your budget. It's a drain on the attention and time and resource span of your consumer. So yeah, that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. And I know we're at time. I'm just going to briefly make sure that I internalize that last bit, because there's a lot of really good stuff there.
Okay.
So content kit is like the first thing that comes to mind, which, like, shout out to Michael McEwen, who's actually former Gong, kind of introduced like this concept of creating sort of like, I think of it as almost a translation of the content, right? So it's like, it's great to have the lead behind. It's great that you already have this long form content made. But yeah, I need a TLDR, right? Like, what's the TLDR? Like, where can I find all the assets? What do they mean? And so that the salesperson and you, like the ABM leader, like, can both look at it and just be like, okay, I get it right away, and I know how to translate it, like, for our audience, right? Or I know what else we need to be able to translate it. So maybe it is like them taking that, turning it into a 1-minute video, right? Of like, here's X, Y, and Z that that we got from this Gong research, whatever, Gong Labs, and making a compelling case, right? But just knowing what to do next, right? Like, to your point of the what's next, is creating kind of a content kit, and I think that's something that content marketers can improve on, is understanding the why. Like, why did we make this content, right? How can we make it accessible internally? Right? And like, how can we make it more accessible externally, right? Just thinking about like, why does this exist, and how can I easily like translate this for people internally and externally? And that like just makes everything easier.
You said it in the right order too, actually. So why am I doing this in the first place? This should align to some top company goal, right? Secondly, does my internal audience, sales and above, know how to use it? Create a quick minute overview video. That's what I do in my newsletter. Like, hey, here's where you find it. Here's how you use it. Here's how Sam over in SDR, this is how he sent it. This is how it was received. Boom. There you go, right? Then the external just becomes so much easier. And so if you're at a company at my size, right, like we're a little over 1,200 now, if we had everybody operating at that rhythm, that's how we're getting the message out, right? So yeah, you hit the order beautifully. And I'm glad you gave a shout out to Michael too. He's still very much well loved and appreciated by myself and by other Gongsters.
Yeah, he's fantastic. So can't give him enough shout outs. But this was also fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and for translating ABM for folks, right? I would love to see a copy of like one of those newsletters, by the way, if you're open to sharing that. I think that'd be really helpful for folks. But where can people find out more about you, find out more about ABX, ABM, all of the account-based things?
Corrina Owens on LinkedIn is where I mainly post all of my ramblings and rants. And thanks, Camille, for letting me have 3 of those today. I'm also on TikTok featuring _Corrina. I don't know. Try me out. I'm not for everybody. I'm a little more quirky on there. So see if I'm your flavor, and totally fine if I'm not. And then if you do want more resources, I do have a lot of free codes to share with you for courses that cost $400 and up. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out to me in my DMs and ask for them. I'm happy to share them. I would not send them if I didn't believe in them and stand by them and think that they were helpful in some way. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me on any of those mediums.
I'm going to have to check out that TikTok now.
Let me know what you think.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Corrina.
Thanks, Camille. Appreciate everything you do.
Thanks for listening to Content Logistics. This episode was produced by Motion, a done-for-you B2B podcasting agency for busy marketers. If you liked what you heard, please follow the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.